everybody. I want to make sure we're all here and solid. Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us during Eco3 Earth Week, which is a week-long celebration of our community's commitment to sustainability with a lineup of events, learning, and service. Each day this week, we will be leading a series of virtual webinars, shedding light on the 4 sectors that contribute to the majority of greenhouse gas emissions in Duluth. These include food and agriculture, transportation, buildings and housing, and energy production. In developing the Duluth Citizens Climate Action Plan, it was determined that food and agriculture accounts for approximately 22% of Duluth's greenhouse gas emissions. So to reduce those emissions, the most important action that we can take is to develop a local and ecologically sound food system infrastructure that enables us to grow, process, and distribute the food that our community residents and businesses need. So today we will be joined by Evan Flom with Community Action Duluth, David Abaz with the University of Minnesota Extension Northeast Regional Sustainable Development Partnership, and Star Brainerd with the Duluth Community Garden Program. So we thank you, and with that, I am gonna pass it over to Evan. I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen here.
All right, hey everybody. Thank you for the invitation to join the conversation today. Like Melissa said, my name is Evan Flum, and I am the program manager of Seeds of Success, which is a food justice program over at Community Action Duluth. So the way I work within the local food system is specifically through the nonprofit sector and food access realm. And so just a little bit of background on our program. We've been operating since around 2010 in Duluth as a program of Community Action Duluth. And our program has taken many different, sort of iterations over the years. But over the past few years in particular, our programming is predominantly through the Lincoln Park Farmers Market, as well as the Hillside Farmers Markets, where we host weekly markets in both Lincoln Park and Hillside from about mid-June to the last week of September, first week of October. And we run an EBT match program. We offer $4 for free to anybody under 18 at each of those markets as an initiative to increase access to spaces like farmers markets for low-income community members. And we've seen over the course of the past few years that over 50% of the sales that happen at our table go straight towards those efforts. Actually, last year during COVID times, we saw closer to 80% of the sales that happen at the farmers market management table be through those food access initiatives. So those sales happening with EBT cards or being free funding to kids doesn't account for any cash sales that we see our farmers market vendors do, but we see that as a success in the sense that it, again, is increasing access to those markets. And we have a new initiative. Sorry, I haven't prepared much of a PowerPoint for today, but I do have one photo that I'd like to share of our newest endeavor through Community Action Duluth. So I'm just going to try and pull up this photo. Hopefully you all can see that, of our new mobile markets. And this is sort of the newest expansion of the food access work we're doing in town. So this is essentially a mobile grocery unit that we have started to operate. And we got this off the ground at the end of February during another collaborative project with Eco3, the Community Garden Program, and the Children's Museum. We had our opening day for this, and We are popping up in Lincoln Park, Morgan Park, in the hillside, particularly the Harbor Highlands neighborhood, to start with this mobile grocery program. And we're actually looking to start expanding the places we go this summer. I'm gonna drop my screen back down, whoops. And so the way that program fits into the sort of the more local foods realm is that we are going to be partnering with the UMD Land Lab to source most of the produce that we sell through that mobile units come summertime. The way we support our local farmers, our local food entrepreneurs with the farmers markets is by offering that space for them there. And starting the mobile markets, we were working predominantly with the Aldi in town or larger food distributors, but we're looking forward to having a stronger local foods connection through UMD moving forward with that. So at that, I'm gonna pause and let the others introduce themselves and their work, and then we can see where the conversation goes after that. Star, David, you want to take over?
I'll introduce. Go ahead, Star.
I'm Star. I'm the Land Stewardship Coordinator at the Duluth Community Garden Program. So I'm running, managing, renting out garden plots at our 21 gardens across the city. That's who I am.
And David Abaz here with the partnership here in Northeast. And I'll be mostly talking about sustainability as a kind of a system and kind of have a collage of ideas about kind of exploring what that means and what we need to address.
Great. Thank you so much, Evan. Was there anything else that you wanted to touch on, or else we could pass it to David as well?
I didn't have anything else to add for my introduction for the time being.
Okay, great. Yeah. David, we can go ahead and pass it on to you if you wanted to share your screen here.
David, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I just want to say it was great to see that photo of the vehicle and how that's, part of us kind of troubleshooting, trying to figure out what does the sustainable food system look like. And so as we look at a sustainable food system, we definitely need to think about it as a system, but with the issues of social, economic, and ecological aspects. So how do we build a sustainable system around food? So I'm going to share with you just a little bit about my journey with sustainability and food, and then the journey in the region from a macro and a micro, and then some things we need to consider as we're exploring this. So I'm going to go quick. I'm going to go through a lot of stuff and just kind of take it in, and then hopefully Star will kind of wrap it up, and others might have questions to kind of put it all together. So I'm just going to go quickly. I started here about 30 years ago. This is our farm. I also had the opportunity to build an aquaponic facility, which I think is towards non-sustainability, but we can get to questions on that. Also started a wolfridge farm to produce the food for the cafeteria, 160,000 meals for that school. And then the Agroecology Center in Finland, which is more of a permaculture site. So in these explorations, I was exploring soils and systems and how do we build this? How do we reduce our footprint as we build things? We had lots of interns, lots of volunteers. On our farm, we've tried to figure out how to do this sustainably. And we started in Finland. I don't know if people have been up to Finland, Our bottom 40 acres is the farm, and we're about 1.5 miles from Lake Superior. Our water is really important, and how we get it and how we power it. All of those systems, as you think about ecological systems, think of diversity. How do you diversify your water sources? How do you diversify your energy? So we have wind for pumping, we have solar, and wind for electricity. We started with livestock, but we've really focused on vegetables and produce more in a smaller area to provide more food to our neighbors and stuff. We have a farmer's market, and we ran a CSA, and we converted a diesel car to run on vegetable oil. So we're actually delivering vegetables with vegetable oil power. So those are the types of things we've experimented with to try and figure out how to do these systems. Also recognize there's a lot of abundance in our wild, whether it's wild rice, mushrooms, or honey from the honeybees that we have. There's also a wild component, whether it's fish and game in our region. So the other thing to look at is, can we build a sustainable system? And this was research that did a long time ago, so the numbers are a little old, but the ideas are not, is how can we grow enough food in our region? Can we grow enough food in our region for the number of people? So we looked at all situations, what was covered by water, what's in the boundary waters, what's on roofs, the amount of land that's actually available. And we looked at the diet and the population, and we looked at the standard American diet, which is the SAD diet, or the new Western Lake Superior healthy diet. And in order to produce 100% of the healthy diet, we'd need about 370,000 acres. We have 1.6 million acres of average or above open land. So this is possible. And back then, the numbers were just under $1 billion if we were to localize our food system. So there's an ecological footprint. There's also an economical footprint on shifting to self-produced and self-consumed foods. And then there's a jobs, 20,000 new jobs to do all this. And it was reaffirmed in a local study just looking at the Iron Range, smaller area, similar type of numbers of both economic and jobs as we move forward. This led me to my work with the Northeast Regional Sustainable Development Partnership. I know that's hard to say, Melissa, and it's a citizen-based group. We have work groups. We have a staff of 4, myself and Diane, and then 2 Vistas who have been absolutely fantastic this year. They are unbelievably skilled workers, and I am so thankful for having the Vista program. So what I'm going to be sharing with you is part of their work as well. I just want to include that. Our 4 focus areas of our region is agriculture, resilient communities, natural resources, clean energy. What I'm going to focus on is agriculture, but it affects natural resources. It affects communities. It affects clean energy, and those all have to be incorporated in this. So as we look at the local agriculture food system, with the partnership, we've been looking at ways we can bolster farmers' income, because the average farm lost $1,800 last year. And so as we look at other mechanisms to bring in income so people can keep farming, this is a tourism where people can stop, pay for a tent site, pay for a room, buy some food. And this is along the trail. We're hoping to spread that to the other trails in the region. Seed saving. We worked on a project on seed saving, and it's expanding some local ownership in that. Bees and wildlife connected within the system to build all the intricate parts of what makes a viable, healthy agriculture system. We're also experimenting with project partners all throughout the region. One of them is a root cellar project using new root cellars that have not passed the pressurization test, so they become junk. So that's a project going in this spring. Livestock control of invasive species. How do we use agriculture for this? Hemp trials, access to land issues, as we have a real access issue. And then the forest to make my assisted migration project. What do trees have to do with agriculture? Well, I'll explain a little bit later what that means. Also looking at what makes future farmers. So we just finished a study with David Searing at UMD and a whole bunch of others with the Northland Food Network on what makes a successful internship and what actually creates the next generation of farmers. And we'll get a little bit more into that. And how we can maybe build Minnesota Farm Corps that brings equity so that people can't just afford to spend the summer, but people could get paid to spend the summer learning how to become future farmers. So issues we have to deal with sustainable agriculture is we have to increase production in our region. We don't have enough production for the amount we consume in our region. Do we have enough space? Yes, but we don't have enough production yet. So how do we build production, but not at the expense of other issues like soil depletion? Because past agriculture fields are now average or below in fertility. So we have to change the way we look at things. So future farmers, how do we increase the number of farms throughout the country? The number of farms have been decreasing throughout the country for decades, pretty much since the 20s and 30s. And so what we have though in our region is 4 of our 8 counties increasing the number of farms, primarily small farms like Stars, like other farms that are coming along, and a lot of female-led farms. So a real neat effort going on. We're bucking the trend here in part of our region. Soils, again, this is a real challenge because if we depend on chemicals or fertilizers, all these energy intensive things, and as the way we feed our crops versus building our soil, we're going to be stuck down the road because those things take a lot of energy and a lot of transportation and a lot of inputs. So how are we going to rebuild our soils, and what is the importance of rebuilding our soils? And so we look at these as a system, as a community. Just so you know, there's 915 million acres in the US that is farmed. And the typical farm used to be 5% organic matter, and now it's 1, 2, 3%, and we've lost 1/3 of our topsoil. So why is organic matter important? 58% of organic matter is carbon. So this is a win-win type of thing. You add organic matter, you can grow better food, you can deal with more crisis with rain, and you can sequester carbon. And so what this means, on our farm, 1 acre of land was at 0.5% organic matter. When we first grew stuff, it grew like 2 inches and then died. And so we've been in the process of building our soils. At that time, we had 5,800 pounds of carbon sequestered in an acre. Now, as we've increased our fertility, we've increased the organic matter, the calculations come out, we now are containing, for a 15% organic matter soil, 174,000 pounds of carbon in our soil. So this is a way, and now we can take all these other challenges because the soil's better, it's richer, it's growing more food. So it's a win-win. And whenever you reach a win-win situation, you got to jump on those because a lot of times you have a win-loss with something else. So if you looked at 5% organic matter for the whole country, we'd be at 159 quadrillion pounds of carbon. So this is nothing to mess around with. This is a real opportunity to sequester some of that carbon that's currently being released. So the natural recycling of carbon is 225 billion tons each year. So the problem is humans are adding 5.5 billion tons per year on average. And so this is what we're up against. Agriculture, soil, carbon and soils can be part of that solution. Other thing about fertility and biochar, did research at Wolf Ridge, looked at lime, ash, biochar, biochar lime, biochar ash. You see that 10 times more effective? That was the biochar and ash. Biochar alone, not so good. Ash, and at least initially not so good, but together, biochar is like the sponge. It's got really highly negatively charged. And so all those positively charged nutrients get sucked and grabbed into it. So biochar with ash is a real solution for us. Can we make biochar and ash in this region? You bet you we can. So we're not shipping lime from southern Minnesota or other places, more savings on stuff. Seeds, important issue. How do we build our own supply of seeds as we move forward? Profitability. we've gained more income, gross income, but have lost net income. You see that the bars on the right, the blue, orange, green, the one on the left where there's nothing there, that's the average farm. That's how much they're losing. The way farmers are making it, the typical farm, is by outside income. That's the unfortunate reality. The food dollar that the farmer's getting is very small. Part of that dollar is now down to 7 to 11 cents on the dollar to the farmer. So issues of marketing, how do we reach people? How do we build this system? Capital, infrastructure. These are high energy intensive types of things that are needed to build a food system. We've lost a lot of in our region. We used to be much more self-sustaining. We've lost a lot. We used to have 7,000 acres of raspberries in the Duluth area. It's mostly gone. And we used to ship to Chicago and other places these things. That's how we used to be. Can we get there carefully and intentionally? Infrastructure. How do we build that system that's more efficient? Local systems don't necessarily mean more efficient. So we can use people like Stacy Stark with the GIS to map, where do we situate stuff? How do we move materials back and forth? How do we use transit, like the Arrowhead, to be moving things back and forth because half the bus is empty? So we have to be more creative on how to build an efficient local system so we actually reduce the number of miles. Winter storage, how do we do that energy efficiently? Root cellars, how do we grow things in the winter? Of winter greenhouses, they can work, but it's a high capital investment up front. Issues about education, not just the farmers, but the communities, through community conversations throughout the region. How do we build understanding about the challenges of growing food? And how do we actually build a real system that's going to solve these problems that's also local? Energy in, huge agriculture. Look at that yellow, diesel. Fertilizers, number one thing, making nitrogen fertilizer takes an incredible amount of energy. Lightning makes 10% of the world's nitrogen. And that's how much energy it takes to make nitrogen, the equivalent of lightning bolts. And so that's the type of inputs that are going on into our agriculture. So organic, sustainable soil building. And that means we have livestock on the environment, but it's integrated, it's sustainable, it's grass-fed. Issues around climate change, you all know the story. It's getting warmer. We also know the storm amounts. Duluth knows it very well, how strong storms can be and how destructive they can be. And if you get 10 inches of rain, that's not going to help a farm. Carbon in the soil will help. Organic matter will help to a point. And that's part of our resilience in agriculture. We don't want this. We want solutions. So how do we prevent? We create sustainable based energy to run all these systems. We use solar. We integrate wild flowers in and beehives. We be more creative with how we create our future. We capture methane from dairies and use that energy to run the dairies and the nearby homes. We use agrophenology to adapt using natural based calendar system instead of our regular calendar, which is no longer as helpful as it used to be because conditions have changed and radicalized. Forest assisted migration, the point of this is we're growing it through the farmers. How do we build a resilient forest? By using farmers in our region. And we have 15 growers doing a pilot project growing 85,000 tree seedlings. And Joel Arvista is key in the success of this project. So it's all integrated into this whole system. How do we build this system? How do we build it together? And we can build it. And that's, I'll end and then pass it on to the star of the show.
Awesome. Sorry, Star. No, I just wanted to thank David. That was so incredibly informative. It's one of those things that there's never enough time. There's never enough time. We can always talk about it more. But yeah, and now we'll pass it on to Star Brainerd with the Duluth Community Gardening Program.
Hello, folks. I'm a plant person, so I'm gonna see if I can get this screen share going. Ooh. Moment of truth. Oh, no, no.
Yeah, we're gonna wanna hit present. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Can we see it?
Yes.
Huzzah! All right. So I'm Star. I'm the land stewardship coordinator of the Duluth Community Garden Program. I am also a farmer myself. I run Saltless Sea Urban Farm. So, if people want to ask questions about that later, we can talk about that too. I'm going to be talking specifically about community gardens, but I think a lot of local sustainable agriculture ideas apply, especially urban agriculture. So it all is related. Quick background on the Duluth Community Garden Program. We've existed in some way or form for over 40 years, since the 70s, originally as an initiative to try to provide food for people using the vacant lots in Duluth. Since then, we've expanded and had, from 0 to 10 staff members. Now we're somewhere in the middle. And currently, we have 21 gardens across the city of Duluth, all the way from Gary, New Duluth over to Chester Creek and Arrowhead Road. At most of our gardens, we rent out community garden plots on a sliding fee scale. So that's based on a self-reported income. And then we try to support people as they go through their growing season, growing food for themselves, through education, tool library. Yeah, so those are the main things. I am the one doing all the sort of land management, gardener outreach, and renting out those garden plots. So today we are here to talk about climate change, and I'm going to set myself a little timer so I can know how long I've been talking for. So I guess in the gardens, I'll just say that we're experiencing climate change now. It's not a far off, distant thing. The USDA hardiness zones, which are, if you're a gardener, that's like what's on your seed packet, and it tells you like how many cold days. Basically, it tells you if your plants are hardy enough to survive where you are. And those maps are changing. They are updating those maps because the old ones don't apply anymore, because we're seeing this climate change happening. And then locally, we're, as David touched on, we're seeing unpredictable seasons. We're seeing extreme weather events. For instance, last spring was very uncharacteristically dry, which was really challenging. And specifically in our community gardens, that's a really big challenge because they're vacant lots. We don't have a water spigot set up. We don't have infrastructure there. So we have a lot of rainwater catchment systems, which are trying to be sustainable, use the natural systems that are there, catch the rain. But unfortunately, you need those catchment systems to work the most when there's no rain. So last year was a really big challenge with water access for us. Yeah, so those are sort of my main thoughts. I also just want to note how happy the people look in this picture in our gardens. I think that's important for sustainability. And so we have on the left there is at our Cook Home Community Garden, which is our largest. It's on about an acre. And then on the right is our Strawberry Hill Garden, which has a very, very scenic view over Duluth. It's on Observation Hill. Let's see here now. Okay, next slide. So David was hitting on a lot of sort of macro, large-scale sustainability for our region. I would say that our garden program is sort of the opposite end of the spectrum. We're like the individual level sustainability, like in your own household. And there's a lot of ways that community gardening can both make people more resilient against climate change and sort of mitigate the impacts we're already facing, but also help to reverse it. Like it can be a step in trying to stop the big snowball that is climate change. So one of the first things you think of would be your reduction in food miles. If you're growing your own food right in your own neighborhood, it's not going to be shipped from California or China. It's pretty simple. There's a lot of carbon that's burned in that process of shipping things back and forth. Additionally, David was talking about the carbon that goes into fertilizers, chemical fertilizers specifically. And on our gardens, we require gardeners use organic, non-chemical growing methods for soil health, for the environment. It's also just a level of courtesy, because if you're using chemicals in your plot, you can kind of ruin it for everyone around you if they want to be organic. So that's a way we try to sort of steward our community and also the soil and the ecosystem. So reducing food miles, very important. And the next bullet point, I jumped ahead of myself there, is reducing your reliance on the industrial and chemical ag system. Of course, we're limited by the season. You're not going to be growing your vegetable all year in your garden plot, but through winter storage, pickling, we provide a lot of resources on that too. You can provide a lot of your own food. But when I was looking into this slides, I was thinking like telling you like, oh, on this many acres, you can provide this much of your own food. I find those numbers aren't particularly helpful just because it really depends on your soil, how good a grower you are. There's so many factors that could impact how much you can actually produce. If you're busy, you can't produce as much, but the main thing is that you can offset. You can have really high quality, really healthy food that is grown right there and is completely apart from the big systems that are causing a lot of issues with, huge land use changes and chemicals and, questionable labor policies. Like, you can take at least a small portion of your diet out of that. And if you're really excited about it, you can take a lot of your diet out of it. You can grow a lot of food. It's really cool. And again, David, I'm so glad you explained everything better than I could. But we do a lot for soil building and carbon sequestration. So I've got a picture there of some of our gardeners working in their compost piles. So we're trying to keep our nutrients on site as much as possible by composting at our garden sites and encouraging practices that build up soil health. You get a lot of CO2 into the atmosphere when you're changing the use of land, specifically when you're tilling. And that happens through a process of oxidization. And so then basically your carbon that's fixed in the soil, when you kick it all up, expose it to the air, it attaches to an oxygen molecules and goes into the atmosphere and becomes the stuff we don't want. So things like no-till agriculture and gardening, putting compost into the ground, building up that carbon in the soil, like David said, makes your food grow better, makes it more nutritious, makes it tastier. And also it's literally taking those carbon emissions out of the air like that. So there are billionaires who want to spend millions of dollars on this technology, and it's literally all around us. All we have to do is just plant more plants. It's great. We just have to do it. So there's a lot of ways that there's good stuff. Gardening is good stuff. Community gardening is especially important because, a lot of us don't have gardens or farms we have access to. So the important part about community gardening is giving sort of everyone that access. And that's why our mission is so important for having our rental fees on a sliding fee scale. We don't turn anyone away due to inability to pay. So we try and have systems so people can garden no matter what. And that's really important for environmental justice. Our populations of color are more likely to not own land to be able to garden on. They're more likely to be in neighborhoods suffering from the impacts of climate change and other pollution. It's so important to provide everyone access, especially those who've had it the worst for the longest. Also, just general civic engagement. We really like to lean into the community part of community gardening. It's really not just about gardening. It's about getting you outside. It's about getting you engaging with your neighbors. It's about learning about how things grow. A lot of people, don't know like what part of the plant a potato is, or like have never seen a potato flower. I really like potato flowers. It's just a personal thing for me. I think they're very pretty. But so it's really important for people to understand how our ecological systems work and get those people outside and provide them with cleaner environments, especially in our cities, which can be dirty and devoid of green space. Let's see here. So again, riffing off that city idea, if perhaps some of you have heard of the urban heat island effect. Basically, if you're going to go outside barefoot and you walk in the middle of summer, right? Sun's blasting down. You go on your lawn, outside on the grass. It'll be soft. It'll be cool. You go onto your sidewalk, it's going to be hotter. You go on the asphalt, you might burn your feet. It'll be hot. So taking that into consideration, in our urban environments, we have a lot of these hard, dark surfaces that absorb a lot of sun. So if you think about climate change making the world hotter, you get hotter in the summer, and then you get this bubble of extra hot that it doesn't cool down at night. There's all these hard surfaces. And so you basically get your global warming accentuated in the cities. So having green spaces is really, really important. And one of our gardens is a rooftop garden, which you see pictured here. And so that's a really important step in turning what would be just a slab of heat suck and heat sink to something green that can turn that heat into something edible, reduce the amount of heat that that building is absorbing. So hopefully reducing its energy use, and reducing that amount of heat holding that happens in our cities. Also wildlife habitat, pretty butterfly there. We need that. Climate change is hurting the critters. So it's a little tricky in the gardens because there's a lot of critters we don't necessarily want there, but we do try to share the space with them as much as possible. I'm not going to welcome a bunny into my garden, but to the best of my ability, we want to create more life and more things living. Then larger picture, just restoring urban ecosystems with the urban heat island effect, with the neighborhoods that are traditionally underserved, creating more diversity, putting in more plants that produce more oxygen. Plants have amazing abilities to clean the air, clean the water. These gardens are, any garden is really important in improving the environmental health of any space. And for me personally, if you're growing something, I figure you might as well be growing food, because we want to make more resilient food systems. So I think David touched on this really well, but it's, we're not sustainable. And I think COVID has really taught us this, that we're not sustainable. We're not going to be able to persist into the future if we're dependent on all of these inputs from far away. The transfer lines could always break down. Those businesses could always go out of business. To be really resilient, we need redundant systems that are, repeating the same systems. And we also need local systems that aren't dependent on outside factors. So if people, like I said, can offset at least some of their diet locally, or even offset, they're growing and they donate part of someone else's diet locally, that's a really important step. And something I think I like to emphasize with sort of urban growing specifically versus more rural growing. Most of us do not have enough space. We cannot supply ourselves for a full year of potatoes in the city. The land is at too high of a premium. We're not going to grow wheat in the city where you need tons and tons of space. But we can become more nutritionally secure. We might not be able to grow all of our carbs, but we could grow, all the dark leafy greens to get that iron and all those good micronutrients. We could grow that all in our cities. You could do that in a little hydroponics window setup. So there's different types of food security you want to think about. And I know some people are like, oh, can you ever really grow enough in the cities? I'm like, well, no, but the point isn't to grow all of it in your cities. The point of it is to grow the stuff that makes the most sense in the cities, which is those highly perishable, highly nutritious foods. I think that's my soapbox on that one. Let's see, I got one more slide. So like to come away with some action points for people. I would just say grow anything, plant anything. If you can't take care of a whole garden, go plant a tree. If you don't have space to plant a tree, go gorilla plant a tree and just put it somewhere, and probably someone won't take it out. That's a star opinion. Don't say the garden program told you to do that, but you should do that. Garden organically. Don't buy those chemicals. Don't just buy the Miracle-Gro stick. There's a lot of great organic options that aren't significantly more expensive in any way and are better for you and the planet. You can rent a garden plot from us. We do have some left for this season. So if you want to really dig in, we have space for you. And some people don't have time to grow their own garden. I get that, and that totally makes sense. So when you can, try to go from those local sustainable farmers, because the big industrial ag has a huge impact on climate change. It's so much bigger than any of us were like ever taught in school or in rudimentary climate education. So you really want to try and be buying your food from a good source, and it will benefit you health-wise as well. So that's important. And then, just as I started off with, this is really micro scale. This is like you and your family, what you can do. And the fact of the matter is that we're not going to reverse climate change with just that. That's not enough. It's important for you and it will benefit you. But we need whole systems. We need the whole systems to change. So demanding more from our big companies, because like I said, you're not going to buy everything. You're not going to displace all of your food from your community garden plot. But you can put pressure on those larger ag companies to do better. You can push your policymakers to prioritize green space in cities. You can, push the city to fund the garden program, or, whatever else you want to do in that vein. We're an independent nonprofit. We actually aren't part of the city government, which is fine. We function well, but ideally, to me, that seems like kind of a necessary public service. So that's something to think about. So we want those bigger systems to serve us better, and sort of as we push for that, we also want to do the little micro scale things that we can. So like I said, grow anything. My email is not there, but the website is there, and I am here, and I'm happy to provide my email for everyone if they have more questions or want to talk later. I can also answer questions now. That's what we're doing now, right?
Yeah, we're actually going to do a small speed round of some questions to our presenters today. And we're going to call this speed round the one thing question. And that is, if you can each answer the following questions, I'll kind of ask them one at a time with kind of like the top thing, the one thing that you would wish for, hope for, like people to know, etc. And so the very first one coming from our presentation earlier is that there is, not only kind of food access issues, there's food affordability issues. And really importantly, we have people that are working in the food sector that are not making a living at doing the work they're doing. They're like doing their farming as kind of like their extracurricular activity, as David talked about. How our farms are getting their funds is because they're working off the farm. Star, you have a farm that you're doing. Evan, you've been playing in this space about how do you feed a neighborhood and create jobs and all of that kind of stuff. So the first question, and I think we'll do it in reverse order here. We'll start with Star, go to David and Evan. The first question is what is the one thing that you think needs to happen to make the farming sector or the food sector something that can provide livable wages?
Jody, yeah, that's a terrible question. I think because it can never be one thing. I think anyone that ever tries to give you a one thing to fix a system is lying to you.
What's the one thing that you'd want to start with then? We know it's not going to be a silver bullet.
Yes. Yeah, I'd say, it's so hard because affordability is definitely for sure an issue. Like I said, as someone who runs a farm, this is my other job, the garden program. I think of, can I say two? I have two things. They're both up there. I'll go, they'll make them quick. So one of them would just be a focus on sort of regional systems. I think having, and I don't know exactly what that would look like, but really trying to have things be sustainable and self-contained in your local community and focusing on that. I think that's so important really for everything with sustainability. But I think it also is very true for food and also for economics. If we can keep the money in our communities, if we can get the food coming from our communities, I think that's super important. Then sort of very related to that though, is in terms of affordability from like a farmer perspective, is making sure, the organic production is more expensive. It's just a fact. Well, someone could debate that. Often is more expensive we can get into it later, David, but making sure that all those costs for the additional benefits aren't put on the farmer. And then from the other side, when you're doing that sort of all the extra effort to do like this super great carbon farming, making sure that extra effort, all that cost isn't being put on the consumer. So it's definitely a challenge to make sure that happens, but finding a way to have middle ground where the people who need food and the farmers who we need to stay in business, neither of them are being weighed down with the pressure of this flawed system. Okay, that was my not so short answer.
Great. I like it. David.
I'll say a minimum wage, $15 minimum wage, period. And just people, an understanding of historically, over 50% of people's income used to go to pay for food. And housing was like 15%, 12%. Now it's reversed. Now housing is like 30 to 50% or more, and energy to run the house. And now agriculture is farmers getting 7 to 12 cents of the food dollar, the percentage of people's dollar. So just to recognize that we've had a cheap food policy that goes to Star's issue. So we have to address it at the policy level, but we have to get people money in their pocket to be able to afford it. Because right now it can't come off the back of farmers.
Great, thank you. Evan.
I am just basically going to echo what David has to say. And sometimes I struggle with answering this question by discussing policy because it is, again, that macro level, and it can sometimes feel less tangible. And our programming at CAD is very boots on the ground focused in the way we try to address food justice issues. But the fact of the matter is that minimum wage, universal health care, those are issues that pertain to the food system. Those are also food justice issues. So again, I just want to echo what David has to say, that work does have to happen at the policy level, because that is what has rippled for decades and what has created these injustices and inequities for decades. And so to begin to reverse that policy has to be reversed.
Great, thank you. And I know Evan has a little bit of conflict with his schedule, so we're going to throw one more question and start with Evan this time. What gives you hope when we think about climate, when we think about food and ag and community? What gives you hope?
That is a great question, and I'm not going to look any further than the people I work with directly in our food system. As we get ready for this season of farmers markets, I have already had conversations with Star and other women farmers and also farmers of color that I feel like are the number of women and BIPOC farmers that are entering the community or growing their businesses has been huge over this past year. And so they've come to me with all sorts of questions, and we're finding new ways to collaborate with each other, to support each other. That has been looking outside the realm of just having them pop up at the farmers market by sharing resources, which includes, like sharing kitchen space, sharing certified cooler space, stuff like that. And so those collaborations, which I know maybe that sounds kind of small, maybe that's a funny thing to be hopeful about, but just those conversations that are already starting to happen have given me a ton of energy and make me really excited about the work I'm doing in the community that I work within and for. So that's my answer to that.
Yeah,
great.
I'd echo it's Evan, it's Star, and it's all those new thinking and new energy. And I think the other thing Gandhi talked about, change being a spoonful of curd in a vat of milk. The next morning, the milk wakes up as yogurt or cheese or something. Doesn't know what happened. And so, but what do you need for yogurt to take? The right temperature. And COVID has created some temperature injustices and access has created some temperature. So I'm hoping the temperature is right for a leap forward of comprehension and new thinking. So I'm hopeful for that.
I love a dairy-based metaphor. That's great. I'd say for me, I just really, really love this time of year. So I get a lot of hope from things turning green and plants. Especially, I think we're really, really lucky to live here. I know some people probably don't feel that way because of our winters, but I've lived in a place where there really weren't super distinguishable seasons for a while. And there is just nothing more magical and just sort of makes you sort of in awe of what the planet and nature and tiny organisms can do. So things turning green gives me a lot of hope. And yeah, I'd say people I'm working with, farmers I work with, the amazing things gardeners grow in their community garden plots. And when you get that kind of energy, there's a lot of good things out there that are pretty inspiring.
Great. I'm going to give you a choice as to which of these two questions you answer. Your favorite plant, or what's one piece of advice that you would give to somebody that's looking at maybe wanting to get involved in gardening or farming? And we will start with David.
Fortunately, my answer is good for both questions. It's Swiss chard. And the amount of nutrients per square foot, if you really want to get the most nutrients from a small area, it's Swiss chard. It keeps growing, good fertile ground. And it is one of my favorites, but you have to cook it. And so I do a lot of curries with Swiss chard, and it makes the best curry. Do the stems first and then the greens, curry it up with onions, and it'll not only be good for you, it'll make you happy as well.
There you go. Evan.
That's probably the hardest question for me to answer of all the questions you've asked so far, Jody. You know what, the first vegetable that came to mind though was garlic. And that's mostly because I'm sad that I am finally have worked through all the garlic that I've kept all winter long. So I'm looking forward to this year's harvest. And garlic just happens to be one of those things in my life that feels like the most communal vegetable to me, in the sense that it's like it's the plants that I gather around with friends the most and helping them plant their garlic for the season. Or it's like, for many years has been the thing that I source directly from a friend and myself, as far as the amount I have to keep over the winter. So just personally in my life, it's been a very communal vegetable. And there's been a pandemic going on the whole year. So it's been great to have something that's antiviral and super healthy like garlic.
Awesome. Star.
I definitely can't choose a favorite plant. It definitely depends on the season, the vibe, the year. I'm trying strawberries this year for my first time on sort of a larger scale. So that's sort of what I'm most excited about right now. But also I have a lot of love for garlic. I also really, really love like different fruiting trees and shrubs. So I can go into lots more stuff. But I would like to give advice to anyone who wants to get into gardening, which is a couple things. One, just start. You will kill things. And it's okay. We all do. Stuff dies all the time. And it's a bummer, but it's fine. Like so much of it is just learning from trial and error. And it doesn't mean you're bad at it. It means you're trying, which is good. And then I would say the next sort of right after that would be just get into it. Also, don't overwhelm yourself, because right now the plants all look really small and they all look really easy. But when your tomato plant has increased tenfold in size and the weeds are exploding, it should be fun. The gardening should be fun. So I would say start right now and start small and be okay with killing things. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. Did anybody else think that her favorite plant was going to be a star fruit? Just wondering if it was just me or
It's
not.
not
So,
really appropriate for this climate. So I
well,
star
you
fruit.
know, I'm often not appropriate for this climate, but you know, I'm here anyway. So, well, I'm going to kick it back to Melissa in 1 second. But I wanted to give my thanks to each of our presenters today, and actually bring up just a couple of things. David mentioned AmeriCorps Vistas. And to let you know, Equilibrium 3 has a Vista Core, and we're actually involved in food systems work in multiple ways. And so come August, we will have a number of new Vista positions open. So if you have that, you know, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed person, or you yourself are interested in working on food systems, we have members that are placed, for example, with David. We've had members at the Duluth Community Garden Program. We've also had members at the Fond du Lac Band working, a couple of members on ag and community programs there, as well as members that work on things like land use planning and working in low-income neighborhoods, working on things like energy poverty and housing, et cetera. So feel free to go to the Equilibrium 3 website, and you can learn more about the Vista programs. Second thing is Evan had mentioned the Stone Soup Partnership. That's an effort that's happening with some funding provided by St. Louis County, with a lot of work that's specifically happening in the Lincoln Park neighborhood, which serves, which is unfortunately a food desert. But that has things like community getting together around food. And right now there's a little bit of course, a hiccup with the COVID there. But we are doing things like mobile markets and education, and the community garden program, for example, will be starting some giving gardens this year in which you could volunteer to grow some food that would be pick and eat by people in our community that are in need of that. Today's workshop is one of a series of 5 that we're having each day at noon, so check those out. And then I am going to put in the chat, Equilibrium 3 will be hosting a vaccination clinic here in Lincoln Park, and we still have plenty of slots available come this Wednesday. So if anybody still has an arm in need of a vaccination, we invite you to register for your vaccination. And with that, thank you. I'm going to pass it to Melissa, our MC extraordinaire, and she'll tell you about what's next.
Great, thanks Jody. Thank you to Evan, David, and Star so much for your expert takes on food and agriculture systems here in Duluth. It is 1 o'clock, so I know people are very busy during the day, so we are going to officially end the workshop. However, we do have a 15-minute kind of an optional stay for questions, answers. We can walk through the Duluth Citizens Climate Action Plan as well for anybody who hasn't been able to explore that space yet, which I will also include in the chat super quick as well. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, definitely feel free to speak up at any time. Just a casual discussion here at the end. So